You guys all set up? You ready to go? All right. Good morning. My name is Jeff Rose, Jeffrowes, and I'm a senior attorney with the Institute for Justice. We're here this morning to announce a major federal lawsuit challenging the city of Kalispell's unconstitutional revocation of the Warming Center's permit to shelter the needy during freezing winter nights. I'm going to provide a little bit of context for this lawsuit, and then I'm going to kick it over to my colleague, Christy Hebert, who will talk about the facts of the case. I'll talk about the legal claims for a few minutes, and then Tanya Horn, the director of the Warming Center, will talk about the impact of the closure on the homeless in Kalispell. The Institute for Justice is a national public interest law firm. We represent ordinary Americans for free in strategic constitutional litigation across the country to defend not only their rights, but to set legal precedent that will protect the rights of Americans everywhere. One thing we specialize in is private property rights. The Institute has litigated cases across the country defending the rights of private property owners to use their land to shelter the neediest. Right away, this case is one of the most important property rights cases in the United States. Just last term, the U.S. Supreme Court, in a case called Grants Pass, affirmed the authority of cities to criminalize sleeping in public places like public parks. If the government can criminalize sleeping on public property, the city of Kalispell can't destroy the right of private property owners to shelter the homeless on their private property at night. We have asked the federal court in Kalispell to give us an emergency order ordering the city of Kalispell to allow the warming center to open as scheduled tomorrow, October 10th. I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Christy, who will talk about the facts of our case.
Thank you, Jeff. My name is Christy Hebert. That's Chrisstie. Last name Hebert, Hebert. And I'm also an attorney with the Institute for Justice. In 2020, the city of Kalispell granted the Flathead Warming Center a conditional use permit. And that means the city recognized the Warming Center's right to use its property to provide a warm, safe place for the homeless on cold winter nights. But last month, the city took away that permit and took away the Warming Center's right to use its property to shelter the homeless. 2 years after granting the permit, the Warming Center asked the city for the right to add 10 beds to the bunk room. There was not a single negative public comment about that modest expansion. And so the city gave the Warming Center the green light to add 10 beds and continue serving the community. That was just 2 years ago. But then the political winds changed, and blaming the Warming Center for causing homelessness became a way to score political points. And using a process that it has never used before and would never use against anyone else, the city took away the Warming Center's permit and therefore is preventing it from sheltering the homeless. And that means that the people that the Warming Center serves may have nowhere else to go during the coming winter nights. And when the temperature drops to 20 degrees below zero, to 30 degrees below zero, the city wants the Warming Center to keep its doors closed to neighbors who might have to sleep in the snow. The Warming Center has partnered with the Institute for Justice to file the federal lawsuit against the city of Kalispell. My colleague Jeff Rose will now talk more about that lawsuit and the warming center's claims.
The Warming Center and the Institute for Justice have teamed up in federal court to teach the city of Kalispell that in Montana, private property rights matter. What Kalispell did is truly unprecedented. The Warming Center never broke any laws. It never violated any condition of its permit. We have not been able to find another case anywhere in the United States in which a government has done to a private property owner what the city of Kalispell has done to the Warming Center here. Not only that, Kalispell law has no procedure for revoking a conditional use permit. The city made them up, and that's a problem. The U.S. Supreme Court has been clear that when the government singles you out to destroy your right, it has to do so in a process that looks like a court of law. That means a neutral judge, real evidence, sworn testimony, not a political circus in city council chambers. The U.S. Supreme Court has also been clear that the government can't treat you differently than other private property owners, especially not based on stereotypes about people who are politically unpopular, like the homeless. The city of Kalispell would never dream of destroying the private property rights of any other owner in this city who hasn't violated the law and who hasn't done anything wrong. It was unconstitutional to single out the Warming Center this way. The last constitutional problem. The government can't do things that are actually irrational. If the city of Kalispell is worried about homeless people sleeping in public and doesn't like that, it is irrational to destroy the right of the Warming Center to shelter the homeless on its private property. The Institute for Justice and the Warming Center are prepared to fight all the way to the United States Supreme Court to defend its private property rights and the rights of Americans across the country to do what Americans have done throughout history: use their land non-commercially, charitably, to shelter those in desperate peril. We're happy to take your questions.
Are there any similar cases like this that you've won in the past?
We have. Right before Christmas in 2021, we won an important federal constitutional case in North Carolina, in which the city of North Wilkesboro refused to give a conditional use permit to a homeless shelter. And in that case, the judge said, homeless individuals face many challenges. Attaining equal protection of the law shouldn't be one of them.
Have you filed other lawsuits in Montana about homelessness?
The question is whether we filed additional lawsuits or other lawsuits in Montana against homelessness issues?
Yeah.
Yep. We haven't filed other cases in Montana, but the ability of people to shelter the homeless on their private property is an important national issue, and this case is likely to become a test case across the country for the rights of private property owners to use their land to protect the homeless.
Is this going to affect the city of Kalispell economically?
Closing the Warming Center is going to have drastic economic effects on the city of Kalispell because the public cost of homelessness in police calls, visits to the hospital, ambulance, people with mental illness not being able to get their medication or to take care of themselves is drastically going to increase public cost. The city is also going to be responsible for the financial harm it has caused the Warming Center by destroying its property rights and forcing us to go to court and fight to get them back. This was a terrible idea, and the city of Kalispell is going to have to explain itself in federal court under the U.S. Constitution.
Is it only the city of Kalispell?
So this constitutional lawsuit is against the city of Kalispell. It is not against any member of the city council individually. The city of Kalispell acts through its city council. It revoked the permit 6-3, and so the city of Kalispell is the defendant.
Is relocation a possibility if
say the court decides in the city's favor?
Relocation is not a possibility. The conditional use permit is for this property. This is the warming center's property. It gets to use its property, and that's an important right. And the courts have been very clear that you can't single out a private property owner and destroy their rights without giving them proper process in court and without treating them fairly the same way you would treat other people.
Do you expect the shelter to open this winter?
We are very confident that the courts will realize that the drastic harms of chaining the doors of the warming center shut and the strength of the warming center's legal claims means that the warming center should be able to open. We asked the court this morning. We filed a motion for emergency relief called a temporary restraining order. We're waiting to see what the court will say about that in the next few days, maybe within the next week. And we'll be sure to update everybody when we hear.
Before we take any other questions, Tanya is going to speak for a few minutes about the impact on the warming center and the homeless.
Sure. My name is Tanya Horn, Tonyahorn, and I am the co-founder with Luke Heffernan and the executive director of the Flathead Warming Center. In 2019, we opened the warming center because of the need. The need still exists today. And we still exist today because of the need and because of our community support. In 2019, the city agreed that there is a need in Kalispell. It's okay. The need has increased. That's very true. But if you think that is because of the warming center, then you don't know us and you don't know the people that we serve. If you think that we enable people with shelter here at the warming center, that is because you don't know us and you don't know the people that we serve. It's going to get very cold. And you need to know that we serve elderly people and we serve people who have disabilities. We serve people who are ill. We're worried about the loss of life, and the loss of limb. Let's think about that for a moment. What is wrong with us in the Flathead? There's something wrong in the Flathead, but it is not the Flathead Warming Center. We will continue to defend the rights of those who need our services, and we will continue to defend our right to serve the people in need. I am so grateful for the Institute of Justice. I want you to read their brief to the court. It's going to take a long time, but be grateful that you can read that from the warmth of your home. We have so much to learn in our community about the law, and the law matters. Tomorrow is World Homeless Day. That's because homelessness is an issue, not just here in the Flathead, but throughout the whole world. And we're fighting to be able to open tomorrow. And if we can't open tomorrow, we will continue to serve the homeless because that's what we do.
Do we have any more questions?
What's the timeline for how the lawsuit will be taken up by the city and the court?
Sure. So the timeline for the lawsuit is we have asked the court for an emergency order. Courts will typically respond to that within a matter of days. And we have then asked the court to use that emergency order as a bridge to then be able to fully present the facts and to allow the warming center to stay open for the entire life of the case. Federal cases like this move a little bit slowly, so we may not get a final decision from the court for another year or year and a half. But we want to get the warming center open during that time because our constitutional claims are so strong, the legal position of the city so weak, and the harm to the homeless people so obvious.
question for Tanya. If the shelter were to open tomorrow, how many people do you think would use it?
That's hard to guess. We've been open through the summer for summer services, for showers and laundry and food. It's hard to guess. What I could speak more to is that people are afraid. We have not treated people who are experiencing homelessness well in our community. If you read the brief, it talks about that. People are afraid. They're afraid to walk down the sidewalk. We are being watched. The homeless are being watched. And so regardless of how many people show up, I would encourage our community when we interact with those who are experiencing homelessness on the streets, that we do that with compassion. Because I've lived here very long in the Flathead, 20 years, and I've known us to be a compassionate community. Recently, I've been pretty embarrassed, but we treat people better than they have been treated. These are people from our community, and they deserve our compassion. And they don't have to deserve our compassion. We are a compassionate community. So regardless of how many people come, they will be welcome inside our doors. We treat them with dignity, and we provide the tools and resources that people need to get out of homelessness and to improve their life condition. And we need the whole community to help us with that.
Did you file that emergency motion in Black County District Court?
We filed it in the U.S. District Court in Missoula. So it's in federal court.
Are you guys ready for against another lawsuit that's
We're not worried about any kind of retaliatory lawsuit because the warming center has never done anything wrong. There's no legitimate legal basis for objecting to what the warming center does.
If this emergency opening is granted, how long is it until this case goes through?
That's right. So in certain cases where there is what the courts call irreparable harm, then the courts will allow the rights to be protected for the life of the case. Just last April, the Federal Court of Appeals in San Francisco issued an emergency order protecting Montana bears from injury and death. And so we have said to the federal courts, if protecting Montana bears from injury and death is urgently necessary, then protecting Montanans from injury and death is urgently necessary.
Does the overturning of Grants Pass affect how you're coming at this?
Yes, absolutely. That one of the points we're making to the courts is that if the federal courts are going to recognize that cities have broad authority to criminalize behavior on public property that is a biological necessity, like going to sleep, then the courts also have to recognize the corresponding right of private property owners to bring people in and give them safe, warm shelter during frigid winter nights. All right. Well, we thank you very much for coming out this morning, and we'll be the clients and we as their counsel will be available to answer your questions individually.